This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 20th of December 2025. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin, very happy to be back broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday, and coming up on today's programme, we'll have a look through the week's news and culture with Vincent McAviney, journalist and Monocle Radio regular politics commentator. And then
we looked back at history, and the last broadcast from the ship at sea was in 1989. So, we've got a good old pirate crew, and we're just looking forward to coming out and doing it all over again.
We hear from Kevin Turner, DJ at Radio Caroline, who returns to the airwaves from their former pirate home offshore on Christmas Day. That's all ahead here on Monocle on Saturday. First, though, the news. The United States says it's carried out a large-scale military operation against Islamic State targets across central Syria, following an ambush that killed 2 American soldiers and a civilian interpreter earlier this month. US Central Command says more than 70 sites were hit, using aircraft, helicopters and artillery, as Washington warned it would continue to pursue those targeting American forces. 4 people were killed and 11 injured after a man carried out a knife and smoke grenade attack across central Taipei on Friday evening, starting at the city's main train station and moving into a nearby shopping mall. Police say the suspect later died after falling during a chase and that investigators believe he acted alone. And Kylie Minogue has scored her first UK Christmas #1 with the song Christmas, beating Wham's long-running festive favourite Last Christmas. The hit also gives Minogue her 8th UK #1 overall and makes her the first woman to top the UK singles charts in 4 different decades. And that's your Monocle Radio News. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday. It's my first Saturday back in the studio after a very exciting time, which I'll be telling you about. And I'm joined here today by Vincent McAviney, journalist and Monocle Radio regular politics commentator. Good morning to you, Vinny.
Good morning.
Kylie Minogue.
Yes.
What a hero.
Absolute hero, princess of pop. I think that, although she's Australian, she is basically an honorary Brit. And she is like the nation's kind of fun aunt. I think the British public just have so much time for her. And I think it's really great. We're in this dirge recently of just like, it's been a battle every year between Wham and Mariah Carey, who gets to swap out and be Christmas #1. It's nice to have a bit of a new song to play. Sure. And what's really interesting is she says that she released a Christmas album about a decade ago. And this was a song that they had worked on for the album, but it didn't get finished in time. And it's stuck in her head every Christmas, like, I think there's something there. And it's essentially saying like, YMCA is really popular and there's a dance routine where you spell out the letters. Why don't we do that with Xmas? It's a little bit trickier, I think, to do this dance. The S, for some reason, is very confusing. But yeah, good on Kylie. I mean, 37 years since her first #1, 1988 with I Should Be So Lucky. To keep going in an industry that prizes the new and young, I think it's great for her.
I think we should just hear a little clip of it.
No one knows the words, but we're singing along to our song. Everybody going X-M-A-S, X-M-A-S. Oh yeah, we're going X-M-A-S, X-M-A-S.
So we're trying to spell it out. We're not doing it very well.
No, you can get the X and the M and the A. The S, for some reason, is really tricky to do.
Oh,
yeah, that was one-time Monocle receptionist Kylie Minogue.
So it's so funny that you reference YMCA because I've just done this extraordinary trip, which was a transatlantic cruise on the Queen Mary 2, and it was a literary festival at sea. So of the 2,500 passengers on board, many of them were just there because they loved books, and it was wonderful. But alongside that is this whole kind of coterie of journalists and authors. And I did notice very late one night, but it's kind of sponsored by the Times and the Sunday Times, very late one night in the disco, you had all these kind of eminent names in the world of letters misspelling YMCA at 3 o'clock in the morning, kind of forgetting which way round it went. And it was just, but honestly, Vinny, what an experience. I mean, I didn't think cruising was for me.
Yeah.
In the sea.
In the sea sense. Yeah. Yeah.
But they say that Queen Mary is the only scheduled liner in the world, and this is a transatlantic journey.
It's Southampton to New York.
Actually, I did it the other way.
Yeah.
New York to Southampton.
Yeah.
And it was just extraordinary. Now, I was having an argument.
It's super popular with people who are afraid of flying, isn't it? Whoopi Goldberg takes it back and forth when she has to come to Europe because she's too terrified to fly. Yeah.
And in fact, the captain showed me the log where all of those famous people had just been like signing in. But I mean, we're going way back to really, old movie stars. It was amazing. And dogs, of course, you can take your pets on board.
Amazing.
And in the kennel area, they've got a fire hydrant and an old British street light. So if you're an American dog or a British dog, you can choose which one to use, which was hilarious. Anyway, I was having an argument with somebody the other day about what you call a ship, because normally you would call it her.
Yes,
right?
It's always female.
Yeah. But anyway, this has apparently changed, and now lots of style guides are saying that it's it. But I mean, I think that the way to say it is that a ship is, assigned female at birth. That would be BERTH. Sorry, but go on. That's a good joke.
That's excellent. That is excellent.
I have to say it's not original. My brother came up with it, but I love it. It's my favourite joke of the year. Listen, we are actually going to talk about ships a little bit later on.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Radio Caroline is broadcasting again on Christmas Day, so I think that's going to be
Pirate Radio making a return.
Absolutely, a really fun thing to look at. Vinny, I want to also just talk a little bit about lighting, because it's something that we at Monocle really care about. And honestly, there's so much bad lighting around, isn't there?
Yep.
Just terrible. I mean, I particularly love Christmas, where, of course, you get all the twinkly lights as well. But last night I went to a nightclub, which is not clearly this ship journey has utterly changed me. Not somewhere I would normally go. And it's Lulu's underneath that Members Club 5, Hertford Street. They have absolutely nailed the lighting. It's not too bright. It's not too dim. It's beautifully lit. I mean, for me, more is more. I'm a maximalist when it comes to decor, and they've totally nailed that.
Yeah.
There is a great big real stuffed giraffe in the middle, which was, but I won't go into that. But I was so impressed by the lighting.
Amazing. I have noticed actually on things like Architectural Digest home tours recently, there's been lots of people pointing out that like they haven't put overhead lighting in at all, that they didn't want, any kind of the sort of, inbuilt lighting and that kind of stuff. I don't understand people that have the big lights on in their home. It's all lamps.
No,
and
it's
if
a
you
hill
have
to
to
die
have
on.
it on, have it on dimmers. But yeah, that's really good that I think people are. I mean, there's so many. It's sort of that sweet spot, isn't it? It's not too dark, so you're not sort of tripping around, but equally not too bright, so it's very glary and feels a little bit too much.
And I was really impressed by you booked the table for dinner, and then the table is yours for the night, so you can be going backwards and forwards to the dance floor, but. That's
such a better system, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, it was lovely. And do you know what? I'm just not even hungover, which is extraordinary given that I got to bed at sort of 2:00 this morning.
Well, it's Mad Friday, isn't it? It's the final Friday before Christmas last night. So I was out as well in town in Soho, and it was really jumping. And you kind of hope a lot of, businesses, particularly in hospitality in this country around the world, have had a struggle this year, particularly in Europe. The prices are going up, which means they've had less people going in. And I know from some work I did this week that retailers are really counting on this weekend to sort of take them over their Christmas sales targets to keep them going. And, you still walk around central London and there still are a lot of scars from 5 years ago, the pandemic, lots of restaurants and things shuttered, lots of shops shuttered. And you kind of hope that they kind of make it through the season and people get out there today on this weekend and actually use physical stores and premises again.
I mean, town's going to be absolutely mad, isn't it? Yeah. Let's turn to more serious matters, because one of the biggest stories, of course, today is the release of the Epstein files. But kind of, so what? In terms of what actually came out?
I mean, to me, this is the Epstein files Trump's version, a bit Like, we already know there are thousands of documents that are seemingly missing from this. There are so much redactions. When you search the word Trump in the documents that have been released, it doesn't come up, which is extraordinary for a man that had a decades-long relationship. He does appear in some of the photos, but I think this has been heavily edited and shaped to be politicized, because we've got lots of photos of President Bill Clinton, who denies any wrongdoing. We've got photos of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, and then Michael Jackson, which I think putting those kind of images out is a bit of a curiosity to everyone. Mick Jagger as well popping up in those images. But the detail that we wanted, it's really hard. I was in a newsroom all day yesterday working for Channel 4 News here in the UK, and we had a Programme A and a Programme B in the running order. Programme A was what we could do if it didn't drop. Programme B was what happened if it did drop. And when you're a journalist working in a newsroom, something like that, we had all been assigned different parts of the documents to look at, because you've got to rapidly pour through a massive data dump, thousands of documents, and so everyone is assigned to look for different things, certain people or certain places, and try and search and generate these lines. And obviously the Trump administration dropped it last night, I think quite late in the day, and news organizations rapidly trying to pour all through this stuff, but it's an incredible job to do. But what was clear, I think, quite quickly was we're not getting the full thing here. This is, heavily redacted, heavily edited. And US Congressman Ro Khanna's been out saying, this is not what the law said should be released. This is essentially breaking the law. And they are pretty furious about all of this. I mean, I kind of feel like it will be, with this administration and how tightly they control the Justice Department under Pam Bondi, we will never get the full documents. I think it will have to be some kind of leak scenario to really see what is in these documents. Some sort of brave person in the US Civil Service who has access to this, slipping it out on a USB drive to a journalist. And I think, that is probably going to be the only way we get the true story of what went on.
Yeah, I mean, and some really disturbing pictures, very young girls with lines from Lolita tattooed on their body parts, and it's just really...
Yeah, I mean, and I think the royal family will be feeling pretty vindicated this morning for how tough they've been on Prince Andrew, who is still not out of his Royal Lodge mansion. He has until the 31st of January to leave. There is some talk as well that he is trying to resist still that departure, but I mean, the shot of him spread across sort of 5 or 6 young women's laps, their faces redacted, and above them Ghislaine Maxwell looking down. I mean, it's a pretty horrible image.
If I could just give you a little literary recommendation here, and I'm not drawing any comparisons, you can do so once you've read the book yourself. John Boyne, The Elements. Read that book and find the character in there that most resembles somebody we've just been talking about.
That was his series of 4 books, wasn't it? It was sort of Earth, Water, Wind, Fire. They were sort of
he
really
talks about a very sadistic, very aristocratic and rich man with marathon sexual tastes. So let's talk about Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
He has held his annual marathon press conference. What did he say?
I mean, what an extraordinary... Every year, this sort of hours long. I mean, I was watching it on a feed coming yesterday. Luckily, I wasn't the journalist that was assigned to cover it, because you have to watch, 5 hours of him sitting there, seemingly taking in questions from not only the kind of gathered audience, but this sort of phone-in audience from around Russia, and then 1 or 2 foreign journalists that are coming in as well, that are allowed, like Steve Rosenberg from the BBC, an excellent journalist. But it was the usual. He was giving his usual spin on everything. He was even touching on the asteroid that was flying through the solar system yesterday, at one point joking, claiming it was their new weapons system, but said, no, we think it's just an asteroid and it will be fine. He was talking about the war efforts in Ukraine, saying that it's effectively saying it's going well, they're seizing more ground. It was a bit of a marathon, but it shows that he is, pretty happy with how things are going currently in Ukraine. He was very critical of the European Union leaders, accusing them of, being sort of worse than burglars, that they were trying to steal Russia's money and assets.
And he's won on that, right? Because Ukraine is not using...
Yeah, this
Russian
is really...
assets.
I mean, it's really disappointing, actually, that... you've got, I think it's around roughly 200 billion euros worth of assets currently stuck in Belgium, and the move and Belgium, this has been talked about for years. Belgium has been nervous because they don't, really know what the legal implications could be. But actually, it seems to have come apart from Italy, which has always had a very strange, complicated, slightly relationship with Moscow itself. But Italy pulled the plug on this. They are seemingly worried about some kind of liability. And so instead, they've put this 90 billion interest-free loan to Ukraine to top up its economy and its sort of war manufacturing, and with the proviso that it will at some point be paid by Russian reparations. I mean, it's just extraordinary. If you think that there's going to be a court that can enforce reparations on Russia to Ukraine, that is wild, magical thinking, and it's mad when and you're so worried that Russia will come after you and be able to lodge some kind of claim for. I mean, it is extraordinary, and I think it's very disappointing. This will ultimately be footed by EU taxpayers, and I think they should be pretty rightly annoyed at Italy for thinking that it was going to create some kind of mass liability for the EU. That you're saying if that's there.
But I mean, there have been unofficial attacks, haven't there? I mean, Belgium's really come out. There've been drone attacks. There've been threats. There've been all sorts.
Yeah, and I think Europe needs to get really tough on the shadow fleet, because what we're seeing is these hundreds of vessels in the Russian shadow fleet. One of them struck in the Mediterranean in the past 24 hours by a drone. Actually, the first sort of strike there. These vessels, what we understand they have on the keel of the ship, there is equipment that's been fitted, which is basically mapping the ocean bed around the United Kingdom, around the coasts of Europe, around Ireland, mapping out all that critical undersea infrastructure. So these are these giant cables that basically carry the modern economy. These are fiber optic cables that control, internet traffic, but also financial information, telecommunications, everything that we need to live in the modern world. Russia has very intricately mapped this. We think they've dropped submarines and things from these, fake freight vessels that aren't registered, that are all kind of bangers basically going around. But what we know that they're also doing is every time one of these gets a bit close, so as we saw in Copenhagen, as we saw in Belgium, and as we saw, I think, 2 weeks ago in Dublin when President Zelensky went there, all of a sudden, these drones pop up from these ships and swarm the city. They swarm airports. And so far, they haven't, dropped any munitions or flown into anything. But it's Russia saying, we can reach right into your country and do something if we want to. Yeah. And it is pretty dangerous if the technology can't be created to bring these down. And what we're seeing from the front line of Ukraine is, we've got systems now that can jam the radio-controlled drones. So Russia is now flying these fiber optic ones. And if you look at the battlefield in Ukraine, it's essentially covered in this sort of spaghetti of these very thin fiber optic cables that are stretched, 3 or 4 kilometers. Someone physically linked with a controller in the Russian side going over to Ukraine. What they're doing in Europe is they're still using the radio ones because all of the equipment that we're making to jam the radio drones is being sent to the front lines. But actually now it's for Europe to have to build more of this stuff and keep it around capitals, around airports, to try and stop these Russian drones coming in.
Well, I think we can rather neatly stitch together shadow fleet and radio control, because this Christmas a piece of radio history will be returning to the sea. Radio Caroline, Britain's first pirate radio station, will be broadcasting from its former offshore home for the first time in 36 years on Christmas Day. So the programme controller, Kevin Turner, spoke to Emma Nelson from the ship to tell us more.
We are in the middle of the River Blackwater, sort of equidistant between 2 marinas, one at Mersey Island and the other one Bradwell-on-Sea. And
now, just to interrupt, apologies for this one, but for those of us who are not intimately acquainted with the waterway infrastructure of the United Kingdom, where exactly might that be in the world?
OK, we are in the middle of the River Blackwater, basically just off the Essex coast. We can actually look out of the portholes here and see the wind farms out in the North Sea. But we're actually just a few miles upriver, so to speak.
Right. So thank you very much indeed for that. And you are on board, and the clarity of the signal is phenomenal. And that is because Radio Caroline is for those of us who haven't been brought up knowing about this piece of fundamental radio mythology, who are you and what do you do?
The radio station was started in 1964 by an Irishman called Ronan O'Reilly. And he started it because he was also a record promoter. In fact, one of the artists he managed was Georgie Fame. And he went to Radio Luxembourg, which was really the only commercial station broadcasting to the UK at that time, and said, I want you to play my Georgie Fame records. And they just laughed him out of the office. And he said, well, what on earth's the problem? And they pointed to charts on their office walls that showed that all their airtime had been bought by about 5 or 6 big record companies. So Ronan, in the strange situation of having an artist that he was fairly certain would be successful, but couldn't get any radio play. So Ronan, being Ronan, just went, well, if nobody else will play Georgie's records, I'll have to start my own radio station then. Problem was, the law in the UK at the time meant that you couldn't broadcast from within the United Kingdom, that only the BBC were allowed to do that. So Ronan looked around the world, and there were a couple of examples in Scandinavia and one in Holland of a radio station that broadcast from a ship outside the territorial limit of 3 miles. So Ronan basically went and got himself an old ship, and he put a radio station on it, and he parked it about 4 miles off the coast of Harwich in Essex. And Easter Saturday, 1964, Radio Caroline took to the airwaves, and we've sort of been at it ever since, really.
And what, a good 61 years later, tell us what you do now.
We've got a few operations that go on under the sort of Radio Caroline name. We have a land-based operation that's based in Kent, and that supplies a medium wave transmitter in Essex and some digital radio signals around the country. We also have another station called Caroline Flashback, which is designed to evoke the memories of those heady days of the 1960s. And out here on the ship, we broadcast a third service once a month called Radio Caroline North, because in the 60s, Caroline was so successful, after starting off the coast of Harwich, they bought a second ship, and that went round to broadcast off the Isle of Man. So Radio Caroline North in the 60s was off the coast of the Isle of Man. And we now have a collaboration with Manx Radio on the Isle of Man, where they give us the use of their transmitters for a weekend every month.
And wonderfully, one of those days is going to be Christmas Day, not happening on a weekend this year, but nonetheless, you're going to do it on the big day itself. So tell us how that came about.
Well, it was all, a bunch of us old boys. We get together every now and again and we reminisce about how times were so much better in the old days. And one of our chaps said, wouldn't it be fun to actually broadcast from the ship on Christmas Day? Do you think it's possible? And we looked back at history, and the last broadcast from the ship at sea was in 1989. So all these years later, we've got a crew, a motley crew together, 3 of us who worked for Radio Caroline in the 1980s and still do, and another chap called Tom Rivers, who people in the States will know probably as a London correspondent of a variety of American news operations. And Tommy was on Caroline's competitor in the 80s, Radio Laser, on another ship about a mile away at sea. So, we've got a good old pirate crew, and we're just looking forward to coming out and doing it all over again.
There is something wonderful about the intimacy of radio. It is always a joy for one radio station to talk to another radio station, because at the end of the day, no matter where you are, you're only ever talking to one person. And who is that person? Who is your audience for Radio Caroline?
Generally speaking, it's probably a lot of people who are rather older than they care to admit. We do try to bring the youngsters on board. In fact, we've got a community radio station as well in Essex, and they've been very helpful feeding through young talent. But in terms of Radio Caroline North on the ship, we tend to have people who are used to offshore broadcasting. And the other thing is that it's always very different feeling when we're broadcasting from the ship, because like the old days, you literally climb on board and you eat, live and breathe radio for X many days. I mean, in the 80s, it was X many weeks or months. So it really gives a completely different feel. And I think the listeners pick up on that.
That was Radio Caroline's Kevin Turner speaking to my colleague Emma Nelson ahead of their special offshore Christmas Day broadcast. Well, of course, pirate radio is something that I am very familiar with, and really the whole reason that I'm in Britain at all, because back in 2000, me and some colleagues who all work for the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, yes, I know, challenged the state, saying it was unconstitutional for the ZBC to have a broadcast monopoly. Weirdly, we won the case. We went on on to start Zimbabwe's first independent radio station, which was then brutally shut down by Mugabe, who was at that point the president by presidential decree. And it meant we had to come and broadcast from here in Britain. We thought it was for 6 months. I'm still here.
And you have an extraordinary story, which I love, about how when you were a young mum, a group of mothers helped you with the radio station.
Yeah, so somebody had lent us, a commercial operator had lent us a lot of equipment to start the radio station, and he had nothing political to say or do. And if his equipment had been confiscated, his livelihood would have been gone, and he'd have been punished for really just trying to do us a good deed. And we knew that his studio was surrounded by police, and they had a search warrant. They were going to go in the next morning and take all the stuff out. So I phone all my, freedom fighters for fearless freedom, fighting for democracy and all the rest of it, to say, come on, we've got to go in there, find some excuse to get in there, get the equipment out before the search happens tomorrow. And they're all like, it's way too dangerous. Well, anybody that's ever had a baby will know that you are a tiger. My baby was about 6 months old at that time, and I just wasn't taking any nonsense from anyone. And nor were my baby and me yoga group. And I called them up, and off we went into this guy's studio with our babies in their prams. And when we came out, the prams were just a little bit heavier.
Extraordinary. Wonderful.
It was really fun. It was terrifying at
Yes.
the time, of course, but now 20 years later you can look back and go, well, actually that was great. So listen, I wanted to talk about this really big publishing story, and there's a kind of, I suppose there's an element of schadenfreude here, and I don't want to be mean about somebody, but David Walliams, who is the comedian, has risen to prominence as Britain's foremost children's writer. There's some discussion about who writes the books, which is always a case when a celebrity puts out a book, and I really have no comment on that. I don't know either way. But there has been a bit of ill feeling towards him because of this.
And if you haven't come across him, listener, his books are the biggest sellers in Britain and I think a lot of Europe in the past decade for children. He, I think Quentin Blake's the illustrator for many of them, so they've got a real look of Roald Dahl. He's publishing numerous volumes a year. Many of them have been adapted into TV shows or movies. He has been a sort of literary phenomenon and crucially in this story, a cash cow for the publisher.
Absolutely. And now the publisher's dropped him. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, extraordinary. This is there have been rumours swirling about him for a long time, and he has lost TV work. Part of his old sort of comedy stuff, Little Britain, has, in part been looked back on. There was blackface and other things that are now sort of questionable. Even in the early 2000s, how did that go out? He was fired from Britain's Got Talent over, sort of very dodgy remarks that he was recorded as saying. And then there's been this sort of lingering question. And then yesterday, this investigation from the Telegraph revealed that HarperCollins had got rid of him because of his inappropriate behaviour towards young women who were reportedly told to only interact with him in pairs and to not go to his home, which is extraordinary. And the David Walliams has come out and put a statement denying that he's saying that he was not part of any investigation or given the opportunity to answer questions. Strongly denies he has behaved inappropriately and is taking legal advice. Your sort of standard, denial statement there. But it is extraordinary, and the evidence, must be quite strong for an organisation like HarperCollins to lose who will be one of their most lucrative authors at this time of year, particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about lucrative businesses in general, because earlier we were saying that today will be mad in town. There will be a lot of shopping going on. And of course, supermarkets will be thronged too in advance of Christmas.
Absolutely.
One particular supermarket in France, though, is doing even more than record business. Tell us why.
Yes, this is Carrefour, which I didn't know until reading this article, is one of the world's 20 biggest retailers in terms of revenue. It's a huge presence across France and Europe. Now, they have a store in a place called Laval. Had you heard of Laval?
I have not, and it turns out hardly anyone has.
Yes, because it was once voted France's most boring place. It is it's in an agricultural area apparently west of Paris. But there has been a breakout star, 18-year-old Leonie, who is a sort of a student and part-time worker on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. She in order to sort of boost a bit of and generate some publicity for the store, started doing sort of TikTok dances in the aisles in the storage room to French rap and R&B. Some of her colleagues getting involved. Well, they have gone viral, racking up millions of views, and now Gen Alpha are flocking to the store with their parents just to be able to see her working the tills. So they're going and buying an item and going up to her till just so they can sort of chat to her. And it's become such a success that even the CEO of Carrefour has gone to visit. Alexandre Bompard, 53. He's paid 3.4 million euros last year. He's gone to see Leonie, who has generated what is undoubtedly now millions of euros of coverage for him, and she just earns 12 euros an hour on average. But a little positive Christmas story. She's been doing Christmas dancing in the aisles as well.
Oh, it's a lovely story. Thank you, Vinny, because that's all we have time for. But we are going to play out with Kylie's hit song, Christmas. Now,
and we're going to nail the moves
And we're going to nail the
move.
move. I have to ask, though, do you think that we should be calling it Christmas or should we call it Xmas?
I think it has to be Xmas, because or XMAS, like YMCA.
Yeah. I don't know.
I
It's a
don't like
tricky
the word
one.
Xmas, but yeah.
XMAS.
XMAS?
Well, either way, we love Kylie.
Yes.
And thank you for coming on. Thank you also to Mariella Bevan, who is our producer and our studio engineer. That's all for this Monocle. Vinny, that's not how you do the S, okay?
I can't get my head around the S.
Okay. Monocle on Saturday returns next weekend. Have a fantastic Christmas week. So glad to be back here with you. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.